Ever imagine yourself like climbing that political ladder, reaching for the top, only to have it all come crashing down? That's what we're diving into today. The life and death of Kathy Augustine, Nevada's first female state controller.
It's a story that kind of reads like a political thriller, right? Like ambition and scandal, and ultimately a very suspicious death.
Yeah, and to really get to the bottom of it all, we've got a ton of sources to go through, court transcripts and news reports. We even have interviews of people who knew Kathy best, like her family, friends, even political rivals, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see how these different sources paint such contrasting views of Kathy. I mean, she was definitely a powerhouse in Nevada politics, no doubt about that. But she also had a way of making enemies.
Yeah,
Some people saw her as brilliant and driven, others thought she was ruthless, even abrasive.
right. So let's start with Kathy's rise to power. I mean, she was known for being really sharp, quick-witted, and she had this amazing ability to connect with voters and this incredible work ethic.
Yeah, people called her the Energizer Bunny of politics. Always on the go, always fighting for what she believed in.
Exactly. And she achieved a historic milestone, too,
Yeah.
right? She became the first woman to hold the state controller position in Nevada.
Yeah, that's no small feat,
Yeah.
especially a field that's, traditionally been dominated by men.
Absolutely.
Right.
But success in politics, it often comes with a price.
Yeah.
And Kathy's career was rocked by these accusations of using state resources for her campaign.
Right, things like government staff and taxpayer money being used improperly.
Yeah, exactly.
And these accusations led to impeachment proceedings, which was a truly unprecedented event in Nevada history.
And what did Kathy do? She chose to fight back.
Oh, yeah.
Tooth and nail.
Absolutely. She claimed that these accusations were politically motivated, a way to take her down, and it really solidified her image as a fighter, someone who wouldn't be bullied.
Yeah, this defiance, while it might have been admirable to some, it may have also made her vulnerable.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then the story takes this really dark turn.
Yeah.
Kathy's found dead in her Reno home. And at first, it seems like a heart attack.
An open and shut case, especially since her husband, Chaz Higgs, was a critical care nurse.
Right. Seems like a tragic but natural end.
Yeah.
But wait, there's more. The autopsy shows no evidence of a heart attack, and then they find a mysterious needle mark on Kathy's body.
Wow. So suddenly, what seemed like a natural death becomes a potential homicide investigation, and suspicion falls on the people closest to Kathy, including her husband, Chaz.
Right, and Kathy's family. They never really liked Chaz, and there were already whispers about problems in their marriage. Some sources describe their relationship as this whirlwind romance that quickly soured with allegations of infidelity and arguments.
Yeah, but it's important to note that, these are just allegations. The picture of their relationship is actually pretty complex. Some sources say that despite their problems, they still loved each other.
Right, okay. And then a bombshell drops. A fellow nurse, Kim Rimey, reaches out to investigators with some pretty unsettling information. This is where the poison part of our story really comes into play.
Oh, yeah. Kim's tip leads to the discovery of succinylcholine, also known as Sux, in Kathy's system. It's a really powerful paralytic drug, often used in surgery that can be deadly if it's not administered properly.
Right, and what makes Sux so chilling is that it can actually mimic the symptoms of a heart attack.
Yeah, making it really hard to detect after death.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine that. A seemingly perfect murder weapon.
It's a terrifying thought, and Kim's testimony gets even more disturbing. She claims that Chaz had talked about using Sux to get rid of someone. That statement, combined with his access to the drug as a nurse, put him directly in the spotlight of the investigation.
So now investigators have to figure out, was this premeditated? Or was this a crime of passion in the heat of the moment? Was Chaz a cold-blooded killer? Or was he being framed?
Those are the big questions. And that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay, so we left off with Kathy's death and that discovery of Sux in her system. And now the focus shifts to her husband, Chaz.
Right. This web of suspicion starts to form around him. But to really get a handle on this case, we need to kind of rewind a bit. Go back to Kathy's political career and all the battles she fought along the way.
Yeah, Kathy was definitely known for having sharp political instincts. But she also had this reputation for being tough.
Yeah.
Even ruthless at times.
Right.
She wasn't afraid to play hardball to get what she wanted.
Yeah, one example that really stands out is that 1992 election where she went head-to-head with Dora Harris. Some sources even suggest that Kathy used tactics that a lot of people saw as racially charged, highlighting maybe a darker side to her ambition.
Yeah, and this incident really reveals how complex Kathy's character was. Was she just a shrewd politician playing the game, or was she willing to cross ethical lines to win? It's a question that I think is still open for debate. It is, for sure. So this victory, it propels Kathy to the state controller's office, right? A powerful position that she held with a pretty firm grip. But her time in office, it wasn't without its controversies. And we talked about those accusations of using state resources for her campaign, which led to that historic impeachment trial.
And to be clear, these weren't just, minor infractions. Kathy was accused of using government staff for campaign work, essentially blurring the lines between her political ambitions and her official duties as a state controller.
Right. And this impeachment wasn't just a slap on the wrist either.
No, it wasn't.
It was a serious legal process that could have ended her career. But Kathy, true to form, she refused to back down. She fought the charges like crazy, claiming that they were politically motivated by rivals within her own party.
Yeah, and that refusal to resign to even admit any wrongdoing really solidified that image of her as defiant and unapologetic. It's a classic example of her unwavering determination, but it also makes you wonder if, maybe that stubbornness contributed to her downfall.
Yeah, possibly. But Kathy's troubles, they didn't end there. So after she survives the impeachment, she sets her sights on an even bigger target: corruption within her own Republican Party. She launched this whole investigation, digging into financial irregularities, shady dealings, which obviously didn't make her many friends.
No, this move was seen as a complete betrayal by some in the party. She created a lot of powerful enemies who saw her as a loose cannon, someone who was willing to bring the whole house down to expose the truth.
Yeah, and as if that wasn't enough, she then announces her candidacy for state treasurer, a move that totally blindsided her former allies. She was essentially challenging the established power structure, which made her a target from multiple angles.
Yeah, imagine the political landscape at this point. We have this fierce, ambitious woman, already known for her controversial tactics. Now she's taken on her own party, challenging the status quo. It was like a recipe for conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's around this time that rumors start swirling about threats against Kathy's life. Her brother Phil and a fellow politician, Barbara Woolen, they both claim that she had expressed fears for her safety.
These claims are definitely unsettling, but they're also hard to verify. The sources we have don't offer any concrete evidence of specific threats, and it's possible that, these fears were kind of amplified by the stress and pressure of her political battles.
Yeah, we have to be careful about separating fact from speculation.
Absolutely.
But these claims, they add another layer of intrigue to this whole story.
Right.
If there were credible threats, who was behind them? Were they connected to her political enemies or something else entirely?
Yeah, these are questions that really linger even after the trial. Did the investigation into Kathy's death fully explore these potential threats? Or was the focus too narrowly placed on Chaz?
Okay, so now let's talk about Chaz himself. The sources we have, they paint a complex picture of him. He's a critical care nurse with access to powerful drugs. But he's also a man who was deeply in love with his wife.
Yeah, and the prosecution, they painted him as this cold, calculating killer, someone who used his medical knowledge to plan and execute the perfect murder. They argued that, the Satox in Kathy's system, the needle mark, his alleged comments about using the drug were clear indicators of his guilt.
But the defense countered that Chaz was a victim of circumstance, a loving husband wrongfully accused. They argued that the prosecution's case was relying way too heavily on circumstantial evidence and that there was no clear motive for him to kill Kathy.
Right. They pointed out that, a divorce was already in the works, so why would he resort to murder? They suggested other explanations for Kathy's death, like a possible heart condition or maybe complications from previous medical treatments. They even questioned the reliability of Kim Ramey's testimony, suggesting that maybe she had misconstrued Chaz's comments or even had ulterior motives for implicating him.
Right, so we have these two competing narratives, the calculating husband versus the grieving, wrongfully accused spouse. And this trial becomes this battleground for truth, with both sides presenting their evidence and arguing their case before a jury.
And the trial itself was just a whirlwind of dramatic twists and turns. The defense challenged the prosecution's evidence at every step, highlighting inconsistencies, suggesting alternative interpretations. They tried to portray Chaz and Kathy's relationship in a more positive light, emphasizing their love for each other despite their marital problems.
Right, but the prosecution, they presented a mountain of evidence, including those handwritten notes about succinylcholine found in Chaz's car, and the testimony of Kim Ramey, which, despite the defense's attempts to discredit her, it really held a lot of weight with the jury.
And then, in a truly shocking development, Chaz attempts suicide during the trial.
Oh, wow.
He leaves behind this note professing his love for Kathy, denying any involvement in her death, claiming that he could no longer bear the burden of the accusations against him.
Well, so this act, of course,
But
it was interpreted in very different ways. The prosecution argued that it was a desperate attempt to manipulate the jury, a ploy to gain sympathy and cast doubt on their case.
yeah, the defense, however, maintained that it was a genuine act of despair. From a man falsely accused and driven to the brink by the weight of the trial, they argued that if he were truly guilty, he wouldn't have risked his own life in such a public and dramatic way.
Right, this suicide attempt, it undoubtedly had a profound impact on the jury. Adding another layer of complexity to an already convoluted case, they were now tasked with sifting through all the evidence, weighing the credibility of the witnesses, and ultimately deciding whether Chaz Higgs was a cold-blooded killer or a victim of circumstance. So we left off with that crazy twist, right? Chaz trying to take his own life right in the middle of the trial. Talk about a curveball.
Yeah.
It really threw the whole case for a loop. Left everyone wondering, like, what's going to happen now? How's this going to affect the jury's decision?
Yeah, it's a real head-scratcher, isn't it? Was it like a last act of desperation? Or was it all calculated, trying to play on the jury's emotions?
Well, in the end, the jury came back with a verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder. It seems like they weren't buying Chaz's story. And a suicide attempt, it might have actually backfired, making him seem even more suspicious.
Yeah, it just goes to show you how much perception matters in court. Sometimes it's just as important as the actual evidence.
For sure. But even with the conviction, this case, it's not really over. There's still people out there who think Chaz was innocent, that there's more to the story, something deeper, maybe tied to all the political drama and unanswered questions.
Right, like those alternative theories we talked about. Like some people think Kathy's death was a hit job.
Oh.
Someone silencing her because she knew too much. She was a threat to someone with power.
Right, exactly. Remember, she was investigating corruption in her own party.
Huh?
She definitely stepped on some toes along the way. So could someone have wanted her gone that badly?
It's a question that just hangs in the air. And then there were those reports of threats against Kathy before her death. What if those were more than just talk? What if someone actually decided to get rid of her? To protect themselves and their own ambitions.
If that's true, then we're talking about a conspiracy way bigger than just a jealous husband. This is a whole plot to take out a political rival and make it look like something it wasn't.
Exactly. And that's where things get really murky. If there was a conspiracy, who was involved? How did they pull it off and pin it on Chaz? These are questions that we may never know the answers to, but they keep those theories alive.
And there's also the whole question of motive. Like, if Chaz was planning to divorce Kathy, why not just leave? Why go to all the trouble of murder?
Right. The defense made that point, too. They said the prosecution never really established a strong motive. They claimed that despite the problems in their marriage, Chaz still loved Kathy and would never hurt her.
And some people question the physical evidence, too. Specifically, that needle mark. Couldn't it have been from some kind of medical treatment, not something Chaz did on purpose?
Yeah, the experts didn't all agree on that, and it's one of those details that could be interpreted in a few different ways. Did the investigators look at every possibility, or were they so focused on Chaz that they missed something?
So even though there's a conviction, we're still left with this feeling that we might not have the whole truth. Like it's buried under all the politics and unanswered questions.
This case, whether you think Chaz is guilty or not, it shows you how messy human ambition can be, the dark side of power, and how sometimes the truth gets lost in the fight for justice.
It reminds you that even with a trial and a verdict and all that evidence, you can still have those doubts, those what-ifs that just stick with you.
It's a story that stays with you long after you've heard it, makes you question everything you thought you knew about truth and justice.
And that's what's so great about these deep dives. We're not just learning the facts of a case. We're trying to understand the whole picture, all the twists and turns and mysteries that make up the human experience. Thanks for joining us on this one. Until next time, keep asking those questions, keep exploring, and keep digging deeper.